Good to see everybody out this morning. It is on. Is it loud enough? Just a fair. Survey of the New Testament, the Engraving Heavenly Truths. We are on Lesson 5. Go back and review some of the cards from previous lessons. A testament, a contract, an agreement. This one, the New Testament, happens to be an agreement given to man by God. What's the purpose of the New Testament? Why do we have it? God wanted us to know how to be saved. Purpose is to save all men. What age was Jesus when He sat in the temple with the teachers? 12 years old. We don't know a lot between ages 3 and 12. We know what happened, his birth, goes to Egypt, comes back, then he's at 12 and he's sitting in the temple, and then from 12 to about 29, 30, something like that, don't have a whole lot else, do we? But in that period, we learn about the forerunner, the one that came before. And who was that? Okay. Learn about John. John came before, blazed the trail, prepared the way. Baptized Jesus. That's some other cards that we see there. Jesus' ministry starts, but prior to that, He goes and He's tempted of the devil how many times? 3 times. Tempted in all points as we are. Just like we mentioned, the same as Eve. Lust of flesh, lust of the eyes, the pride of life. He calls His closest associates and gives them a charge that they are to go out. And we call this, the first one, the limited commission. What was the limited commission? It's limited, that means there's some exclusions there, isn't there? It's not wide open, it's limited. Go only to the Jews. That's the limited commission. Then we talked about miracles. Jesus used miracles. We'll find other people in the Bible use miracles. What was the purpose of miracles? It's a proof or to confirm what's being said, either the message itself or, as we say here on the card, to confirm the messenger, that the person is speaking the truth, or it's the things that God wants spoken. Sermon on the Mount, we'll just pull this up. It is almost call it the constitution of the kingdom. Jesus talks about being happy, not being anxious, hypocrisy. You can see the list there. Mentioned even some other things. Jesus taught with parables, not the only person that taught with parables, not the first person that taught with parables, but He's probably the most well-known for teaching parables. We even mentioned back in the Old Testament, Nathan, when he went to David, after David's encounter with Bathsheba, Nathan uses a parable. You know, the man with his one lamb. So it's not the first use of parables, but Jesus used them and used them rather well. So what is a parable? The good old saying, an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Something that's well known, something that is widely known, and can be molded and shaped into something that, for those that want to hear and want to know, they can understand it. For those that are trying to not understand or not get with the program, kind of hides the message a little bit. So that's what parables. So then we get to lesson 5. We have jumped all the way from Jesus' birth to the one event there at age 12, to the start of His ministry, the temptation, the preaching. Remember we talked about He preached the kingdom of heaven is at hand. This is about a 3-year period. And now all of a sudden on lesson 5, we're up to the events of the last week. Kind of went right through. I guess that's what a survey is, isn't it? The events of Saturday of the last week. Okay? Jesus is going to be anointed at Bethany. All right. There are the two passages, correlating passages. Matthew 26, 6 through 13. We're going to read today. I need some readers. Jerry, you're going to read. I'm going to tell him. Matthew 26, 6 through 13. Mm-hmm.
And when Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very costly fragrant oil, and she poured it on his head, and he sat as he sat at the table. But when his disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why this waste? For this fragrant oil might have been sold for much and given to the poor."
Okay. First of all, Bethany, in the suburbs of Jerusalem, we would say, about 2 miles. This is going to be important for what's going to take place the next day when we talk about distances. So keep that in mind. It's a short distance, 2 miles. I say short distance. Short distance for us to jump in the car and go somewhere. Maybe not so much short distance, 2 miles. Wouldn't be for me if I had to walk. But that's where we're talking about. 2 miles, he's at the home of Simon the leper. And he comes, and he's sitting at the table. And it says a woman in Matthew. If you turn to John's account, what do you see? That woman is named, it's Mary. Bethany is the home of Mary, Martha, and their brother. What was his name? What do we know Lazarus from? He died and Jesus raised him, didn't he? So Mary, Martha, Lazarus, that's also in Bethany. That's their home. So they're seen to be there. Some of the apostles are there as well, right? You have... Oh, okay. Go ahead.
You want me to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
But when Jesus was aware of it, he said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, but me you do not have always. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial. And surely I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial of her."
Okay. So now we have the whole picture. Mary anoints Jesus with expensive oil from an alabaster flask. Usually these were sealed, and when they were used, they were broken or whatever, and it's alabaster, so it's an expensive container, but it's also expensive ointment. And there's some rumblings going around, first of all, from, it says the disciples. We can see if we read John's account, one in particular was complaining about using that. What was the complaint? You just wasted all this for no reason. Should have been sold. We could have distributed the money to the poor. Okay? We see in John's account, Judas is the one that makes that comment. And what's his real motivation? He's the treasurer. It says he holds the purse. He wants that money in there, undoubtedly, so he can steal it, dwindle it away a little bit at a time, or maybe all at once. Nobody kind of knows. But anyway, it mentions he's a thief, so that seems to be the implication. He wants it in the bag so he can have control of it. We'll just leave it at that. Okay? So then at the end, what Jerry read, the second part of that is, Jesus says, why are you troubling Mary about this? She has done a good thing. Okay? She anointed him. Now, anointing, that has a special place. We think about that when we talk about biblical events or biblical times. Kings were anointed, were they not? We know for sure David was. 1 Samuel 16. Prophets, Elijah and Elisha, were anointed with oil. 1 Kings 19. Priests, I think we just learned this on Wednesday night. When Aaron and his sons were chosen to be the priests, they were anointed with oil. It's a consecration, setting apart or dedication that's being made. And this is, to me, it's an outward sign of what God is approving of. They went, the prophet Samuel, I believe, went and anointed David. That was an outward sign of what God's choice was of who was going to be the king. And we see that all the way through. So, when Mary is anointing Jesus with the oil, what does Jesus say that she's really doing? She's preparing him for what? Okay, preparing him for his burial. Don't you think that was shocking to those that were sitting there, reclining there around the table eating? They didn't understand, did they? Couldn't have understood. Because later on we see that they still didn't understand. All right. So Jesus at Bethany at home of Simon the leper. Mary comes and anoints him with this precious oil ointment as they eat. There was some complaining. Jesus says, don't trouble, what would we say today? Don't put down her for doing this or the act that she's doing. Don't make it something, a bad deal. It's a good deal. You're going to have the poor with you all the time. I'm not going to be here but for a little while longer. So while I'm here, honor, respect, enjoy, maybe even while I'm here. Then what did he say? This act that she did, it's going to be remembered for how long? Forever. And here we are, we're talking about it this morning. It's such a good thing. She's going to be remembered for this. And we see we're doing it today. So, all right. So Mary's commended for her actions. Talked about Judas. He was a greedy thief. That was in John chapter 12, verse 5 and 6, I think. All right. Any comments or questions about what happened on Saturday? This is 1 week before the crucifixion. So what happened on Sunday? Jesus rode a donkey into Jerusalem. A triumphal entry, it's called. Any other names that it's might be mentioned by, even though they're not specifically said in the Bible? Yeah. In the world, 1 week before the holiday of Easter, especially in the Catholic world or some Protestant, but what is that Sunday called? On your calendar, if you look at it, always the 1 week before we celebrate Easter. What's it called? Palm Sunday. Okay? And we'll see why here in just a minute. Those items or those names you're not going to find in the biblical reference, but that just gives you, I just wanted to give you an idea. That may be a way to help you remember what's going on. So Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a colt of a donkey. Never been ridden before. I always found that strange. I don't know too many animals that hadn't been ridden before that you get on and ride and there not be a rodeo. Mark chapter 11, 1 through 11. Mark 11. Jesus tells them to go into a village and they'll find this colt. No one is set on it. Bring it loose. Loose it and bring it. If anyone says, "What are you doing?" said, "The Lord has need of it." Go down a little bit further in the reading. As they spoke to them just as Jesus commanded when they had found it. And the owners let them go because that's just what they did. The Lord needs it. There wasn't any further need for explanation. So he brought the colt to Jesus. I'm down in verse 7. Put some clothes on it. I don't mean they dressed it. What'd they do? Like we would do, we'd lay a blanket over its back. Okay? Spread their clothes on it. Okay? Down the road they went, didn't they? What were the people doing? Folks, this is 1 week. This is less than 1 week. This is Sunday to Friday before the crucifixion. And what were the people doing in this circumstance if you read there? Spread their clothes on the road. Others cut down leafy branches. That's where the palms come from, right? Making the road presumably smoother, maybe less dusty. I don't know why they would do that, other than kind of like the red carpet. I think that's a good image that we have. Just pomp and circumstance, isn't it? It had always been kind of first of all, this fulfillment of the prophecy from Zechariah 9:9 that the king would come in on a colt. It had been done before. Solomon did this. 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 33. It's often seen with judges. Judges would ride donkeys. What were they saying? Verse 9, and those who went out before and those who followed cried out, saying, Hosanna. What's Hosanna mean? Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the kingdom of our father David that comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. Save now. Hosanna means save now. He mentions the fulfillment of the prophecy found in Zechariah 9:9 that a king would come showing meekness and authority. Somebody can come in blazing hot. They may have the authority, but it comes across as different, doesn't it? If you come in riding a donkey, slow and calm, you still are perceived that way. You have the authority, but you let everybody else proclaim that authority on you. And I think that's what we're seeing here. You don't grab it by the throat and take a hold of it. You let it come. Jesus had all the authority. We see that. meek, riding on a foal of a donkey. He was in Bethany, how many miles to get to Jerusalem? A couple miles, we mentioned. People were throwing their garments, making the way smooth, the red carpet treatment, John said, laying cut down palms and laid there. And I think that's where, this is on Sunday before Jesus was resurrected the next Sunday, which we know is celebrated in our world as Easter. So this is 1 week before that. Any other comments or questions about events on Sunday? So we have the anointing on Saturday, the triumphal entry on Sunday. So what happens on Monday? Okay, that's one of the things that happened. Cleanses the temple, curses the fig tree. They're going into Jerusalem, they're walking. Jesus from a distance sees a fig tree. The fig tree has leaves on it, which should signify it not only has leaves, but it also has fruit. Says that they're hungry. So you can imagine, I can. You're going down the road, you're hungry, you think that you're going to get some kind of fulfillment of that hunger, relief from the hunger. You see a fig tree. That probably wouldn't have been my first choice, fig tree, but that's what they had. So Jesus sees the leaves of the fig tree. They think that it's going to have fruit on it. When they get there, it doesn't have fruit. And what's Jesus' response? Curses it. Curses it. Jesus get mad and lose his temper? I can tell you, he didn't lose his temper. But why would he curse this fig tree? There undoubtedly was something wrong with it. It had the leaves, should have had the fruit on it, but it didn't. Okay. John maybe's on the right track there. I'm going to change it a little bit and tell you, he did it to teach a lesson. That's the point of this. He could have just walked right on by, didn't he? But he wanted to teach the apostles, the people that were with him, he wanted to teach them a lesson. Okay? So he curses the tree. You're not going to bear fruit any longer. Okay? So what's the lesson that he's teaching? Who's he comparing the fig tree to? Does anybody know? Not in this case. Specifically in this case, though, John, he's referring to the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation that has all these leaves and looks like a beautiful tree, and they do all these great things, but they're not producing what? Fruit. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so you're not going to bear fruit any longer. Okay? That's Jesus' point. Now, individually, as John said, we can apply that to ourselves today. And the apostles, the disciples that were there, could apply that as well. If you don't bear fruit, you're going to be, in another case it says hewn down. Remember that? You're going to be hewn down and cast into the fire. Okay? So that's an important thing. Now, we don't get the explanation of that until after the cleansing of the temple, when they pass the tree again. And I think it's Peter. I remember Peter notices, Lord, the tree that you cursed yesterday, it's withered from the roots up. Okay? And then we get the explanation of why Jesus did this. For a lesson, not because he got mad and got angry at the tree and had a temper tantrum. If it had been me, that's probably, if I'd have walked up and not been what I expected, you know, I might have kicked it or hit it or beat it or whatever. That's a different deal. Jesus did this to teach a lesson. Okay? All right, so the fig tree's cursed, Mark 11, starting in verse 12, 13, 14. And then we see them going to the temple. So let's look over there. Probably already in verse 15, Mark 11. So they came to Jerusalem, then Jesus went in the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in the temple. Let's talk about that for a minute. What are we talking about? Those that bought and sold in the temple.
Okay, when people came to sacrifice whatever, they would go and buy stuff. And
Okay.
we had the money changers. If you were in Egypt and you had their currency, they'd come over and they'd charge you an amount.
So if you're making this trip to Jerusalem, you're probably not bringing your calf with you or your lamb or whatever. Okay? So there were animals there that you could purchase so you didn't have to bring them with you on the trip. And they had the variety because of different kinds of sacrifices, because of economic states of the people that were there. They would have different things, birds. Remember Mary offered doves because they were considered poor, okay, instead of the lamb or the calf or whatever it was that they were having. So there were those people that were there that was their profession. They would sell. Now, in my head, I'm always thinking that because of Jesus's, what we see his actions, not reaction, but his actions here, they were cheating people a lot, weren't they? And they were not doing it honestly. Because I think this would be a good service to have. It would be a good service to have, but it had taken over from the whole purpose of what was supposed to be going on at the temple. Okay? So, I don't know. Dishonest? Maybe. We can't prove that. Was it a circus atmosphere? Yeah, definitely. I think that's part of the reason. And I think that's why he decided to get rid of all of it. What does Isaiah say that the temple, God's house, Jesus said, my house should be called what? House of prayer, and you've turned it into a party, a circus, den of thieves. Okay? And so he ran them out. Ran them out.
Now, at what point do you think they started doing that?
At what point did he what?
People like bringing in animals to sell for people to get when they got there.
I'm sure it's just like, I don't think we find a specific instance, but I think it's probably like everything else. Started a little bit, then it became an accepted deal. And so for just one day for them to decide, hey, we're going to bring in this herd of cattle so people can buy them, or sheep or birds or whatever. I don't think it happened like that, but over a period of time. And you have to remember, from the time that they came back and rebuilt what's the temple to where we're at now is hundreds of years. And in fact, 700 years or so. So over a period of 700 years, something gradually takes over and becomes just a regular deal. And I can see, if I was traveling from Galilee in the north and I had to come to Jerusalem, I wouldn't want to drive my cattle with,
I know, but if God said to, I guess let's say God it was theirs, but was it really the best of their, that's what they had?
there's not,
How
And we talked about it on Wednesday night when we were talking about the tabernacle and how much sacrificing was having to be done daily. You know, especially during these feast weeks or feast days. How many sacrifices, so how many animals would it require? I don't have any idea. I just know that it had become something that it was not, I'm not going to say intended, but something that God did not, and especially in this case, Jesus, God with us, God didn't appreciate, didn't approve of what was going on there because of, as John said, exchanging money, and you know that's going to end up with the thumb on the scale a little, you know, for one or the other. They call it den of thieves. You know, they're taking people's money. And not necessarily for the animals or whatever, but charging them too much, having them in a bind. You know, it's like going to a ball game today. How much should a Coca-Cola cost at a ball game? But they've got you in there, right? How much does a hot dog cost? You see what I'm saying? So, you get all the way to Jerusalem, you've got to make a sacrifice, you don't have an animal, they pretty well charge you what they want. Were they charging people too much or more than they should? Maybe that's what the thieves was, Ken.
And also, there's a reference to Jesus that said he forbid them to carry their wares in, which would indicate that they're not just dealing in sacrificial
Right.
animals. Quite frankly, I mean, this was an opportunity, and in fact, they've turned it into a bit of a market.
Right.
They know the Jews are coming in, and so it's also maybe an opportunity to sell some dishes or pottery or coffee mugs. I don't know, but it looks like
And
turned into a bit of a market
yeah,
atmosphere.
and seems like it's in the court area too. I mean, in the area that should be
More respectful,
yeah,
more religious,
more sanctified.
more sanctified.
Yeah,
And
right.
then the other is, and I've read this in the past, I'm not sure what the historical, it might have been Josephus as a historical reference. Don't quote me on that. But there also is a certain amount of, for people who brought their own sacrifices, people would inspect them and go, that's not quite
Yeah.
good enough.
Yeah.
So I'd say, well, we'll take yours, and you need to buy this lamb
Yeah.
because it meets the regulations.
Yeah, and just the den of thieves makes me think that there was a lot of shady business going on there. Yeah. All right. So we talked about the last week Monday. Jesus was hungry, saw the fig tree far off, appeared to have fruit on it. That's what the leaves signified. When he reached it had no fruit, he then cursed the tree that it bear fruit no more. It's a parable in action illustrating how the Jewish nation would wither away. It had the leaves, but it had no fruit. Went to the temple, cast out all those that bought and sold in the temple, and overthrew the money changers' tables. It's written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it into a den of thieves. Afterwards, see this in Matthew's account. He healed the blind and the lame. And I want to end here with, think about this. The day before was the triumphal entry. I keep calling it that. That's not in, but that's, you understand what I'm talking about. He rode in. Everybody's praising him. Hosanna, save now, save us now. You're here to save us. All this. It is a celebration. One day later, his actions caused the chief priests and the scribes to be moved with indignation. And from this point on, what are we going to see? We'd call it the downhill. They got angry. They plotted. And eventually it's going to end up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Friday they're going to kill him. And the same people that were saying Hosanna on Sunday are going to be saying crucify him when asked if they wanted Barabbas or Jesus released? They said Barabbas. They said, what should I do with Jesus? And they said, crucify him. The same people. The same people.
Is according to Levitical law, that without the sprinkling of blood, there is no salvation. So what happened is when Pilate said, I'm innocent of the blood of this man because he's innocent, and the people shouted, let his blood be on us and our children.
Exactly right. All right. Next week we'll talk about Tuesday. My favorite card in the whole series, Wednesday. We'll find out why it's my favorite card. No. Thank you for your attention. We'll take a few minutes break and be back for our worship period.